After Stephanie died, my lawyer called me a fool. My own attorney practically begged me to fight back, but I signed every document they slid across that polished conference table without hesitation. Jennifer and Charlene exchanged satisfied glances, already mentally spending their inheritance. Then their lawyer paused mid-sentence, his eyes fixed on Stephanie's original will. The smugness evaporated from their faces when he read that one clause. But before we continue, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments below. I read every single one. My name is George Pence and I'm 62 years old. For 5 years I lived what felt like a second act of grace with my wife Stephanie in our Manhattan penthouse. She died 3 weeks ago. Massive stroke. No warning. No goodbye. She was reviewing contracts for her import business one evening, laughed at something I said from the kitchen, and then she was gone. The doctors told me it was instant. I still don't know if that's supposed to comfort me. Stephanie had 2 daughters from her first marriage. Jennifer, 34, is a senior investment banker at Goldman Sachs. Charlene, 31, runs a private equity consulting firm. Both brilliant, both ruthless, both absolutely convinced I had somehow conned their mother into marrying a man 7 years her senior for access to her money. The truth? Stephanie chose me. We met at a gallery opening in Chelsea. She'd been divorced from her first husband for 8 years after he left her for someone younger. I'd been widowed for 9 years after losing my wife Catherine to cancer. We weren't looking for romance. We were just 2 people who had learned to navigate life alone and found unexpected companionship in honest conversation. Stephanie had built an impressive specialty import business over 20 years. European textiles, high-end home goods, exclusive distribution deals. Nothing Fortune 500, but solid and profitable. The penthouse in Tribeca was worth $4.2 million. Her investment portfolio sat around $3 million. The business itself generated enough income for a very comfortable life. I came into the marriage with my pension, some savings, and the modest Brooklyn apartment Catherine and I had raised our kids in. Stephanie never cared about any of that. She told me once late at night while we watched the city lights that she'd rather grow old with someone who saw her than die wealthy and invisible. We had 5 beautiful years. We really did. We took long weekends in the Hamptons. We hosted dinner parties. We built something real together. She never once made me feel like anything less than her partner in every sense of the word. If you believe that a life built on genuine love should always triumph over a life built on greed, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't miss the next time justice finds its way home to protect those who truly matter. The morning after Stephanie's funeral, Jennifer and Charlene showed up at the penthouse. They didn't. Call ahead. They still had keys from before Stephanie and I married. I was sitting in the living room, still in the black suit from the service, staring at nothing. I hadn't even changed because what was the point? Jennifer walked in first. Chanel suit, hair pulled back in that severe style that screamed power broker. Charlene followed, equally armored in designer clothes and cold efficiency. Neither offered condolences. Neither asked if I needed anything. Jennifer set her Birkin bag on the console table. "George, we need to discuss the estate," she said. No preamble, no warmth, just business. "Your mother was buried yesterday," I said quietly. "Which is exactly why we're here," Charlene cut in, "before this gets messy." I just looked at them. Messy? Jennifer pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. "You were married to our mother for 5 years, George. 5 years. Charlene and I have been her daughters for over 3 decades. "I'm aware," I said. "Then you understand why. We need you to sign these." Charlene placed a leather portfolio on the coffee table, expensive and official looking. "Our attorney drafted everything. It's straightforward. You're acknowledging that you have no claim to Mom's estate. The penthouse, the business, the investments, all of it." I met Stephanie on a rainy October evening in 2019 at a gallery opening in Chelsea. She was standing alone in front of a massive abstract painting, and when I made some offhand comment about the artist's use of color, she laughed. Actually laughed. Not the polite gallery chuckle, but a real, genuine laugh that made other people turn and look. We got coffee after, then dinner the next week. Within 3 months, we were inseparable. She proposed to me, actually, New Year's Eve, overlooking Central Park from her penthouse balcony. She said life was too short to play games, and she knew what she wanted. The wedding was small, City Hall, then dinner at her favorite Italian place in the West Village, Meenum. Kids flew in from Ohio. Her daughter sent expensive flower arrangements and last-minute apologies about work conflicts. I should have paid more attention to that detail. Those 5 years were everything a second chance should be. Stephanie and I would walk through the Village on Sunday mornings, grab bagels, read the Times in Washington Square Park. She taught me about her business, the intricacies of import regulations and supplier relationships. I helped her finally digitize her inventory system, something she'd been putting off for years. But underneath it all, there was always this current of tension with Jennifer and Charlene. The phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. The holidays they spent too busy with work to visit. The way they looked at me during Stephanie's birthday dinner last year, like I was something temporary they were waiting to expire. Stephanie noticed, of course. She'd squeeze my hand under the table and change the subject. One night, about 6 months before she died, she told me not to worry, that she'd taken care of everything, that her girls would understand eventually. I didn't know what she meant then. I wish I'd asked more questions. I found Stephanie at her desk on a Tuesday morning in November. She was supposed to meet me for breakfast. We had a standing date every Tuesday at this little cafe on Hudson Street. When she didn't come out of her office by 9, I went to check on her. She was slumped over her laptop, still wearing her reading glasses. The coroner said it was a massive stroke. He said she probably didn't suffer, that it happened so fast she wouldn't have known. I held her hand anyway, waiting for the paramedics, telling her I loved her even though I knew she couldn't hear me. The funeral was 4 days later. I barely remember planning it. Stephanie's assistant helped with most of the arrangements. Jennifer and Charlene flew in the night before, stayed at the plaza instead of the penthouse. They said they didn't want to intrude on my grief. At the time, I thought it was considerate. The service was at a church in Midtown. Stephanie wasn't particularly religious, but her mother had been married there decades ago. About 200 people came, business associates, old friends, her college roommate who flew in from Seattle. Jennifer gave a eulogy about her mother's entrepreneurial spirit. Charlene talked about childhood memories at their summer house in the Hamptons, a place I'd never even seen. Neither mentioned me. Not once. It was like our 5 years together had been erased. After the burial, people came back to the penthouse for the reception. I stood in the corner of my own living room accepting condolences from strangers. Jennifer and Charlene worked the room like they were hosting a corporate networking event. Efficient, professional, cold. I noticed them whispering to each other near the window, both glancing at me periodically. At one point, Jennifer took a phone call and stepped out onto the terrace. Through the glass, I could see her gesturing, animated in a way she hadn't been all day. By 7 that evening, everyone had left. Jennifer and Charlene said they had an early flight back the next day. They'd be in touch soon to discuss logistics. They hugged me at the door, those brief, obligatory embraces that meant nothing. The penthouse felt enormous and empty. I poured myself a scotch and sat in Stephanie's office chair, surrounded by her things. Her half-finished cup of coffee was still on the desk. I couldn't bring myself to move it. The next morning they came back, but they weren't alone. They arrived at 8 in the morning. I was still in my robe, hadn't slept more than a few hours. The doorbell rang, and when I opened it, Jennifer and Charlene stood there with a man I'd never seen before. Mid-50s, gray suit, briefcase. He had that lawyer look, the kind that cost $500 an hour. "George, this is Richard Castellano," Jennifer said, brushing past me into the foyer. "Our attorney." I stood there confused, still holding the door. "Your attorney? For what?" Charlano gave me a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Pence, perhaps we could sit down and discuss this civilly." They moved into the living room like they owned the place, which I suppose they believed they did. Charlene perched on the edge of Stephanie's favorite chair, the one by the window where she used to read. It felt like a violation. "George, let's be realistic here," Jennifer began, crossing her legs. "You were married to our mother for 5 years. 5 years, that's barely enough time to really know someone." "I knew your mother," I said quietly. "I'm sure you thought you did." Charlene's voice had that patronizing tone, the one successful people use when they're pretending to be patient. "But Jennifer and I have been her daughters our entire lives. We understand her legacy, her wishes, her business." Castellano opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Mr. Pence, my clients are prepared to be very generous. We understand you may have certain expectations given the marriage, but New York estate law is complex." "What are you talking about?" I asked. Jennifer leaned forward. "The penthouse is worth over $4 million, George. Mom's business generates substantial revenue. Her investment portfolio alone could fund a comfortable retirement for someone at your stage of life. My stage of life? You're 62, Charlene said bluntly. No offense, but you contributed nothing to building what our mother created. You were married for a tiny fraction of her life. Frankly, it would be inappropriate for you to inherit what she spent decades building. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Stephanie was my wife. For 5 years, Jennifer repeated, as if saying it enough times would make it matter less. We've been her family for over 30 years. Surely you can see the difference. Castellano slid the folder across the coffee table toward me. These documents simply formalize what we believe is fair and appropriate given the circumstances. I stared at the folder on the coffee table like it was something toxic. Castellano pushed it closer with one manicured finger. What exactly is in there? I asked. A voluntary relinquishment of any claims to the estate, he said smoothly. The penthouse, the business, Mrs. Wood's investment accounts. In exchange, my clients are prepared to offer you a settlement of $200,000. That's quite generous considering the brevity of the marriage. $200,000. Stephanie's business alone was worth millions. You're joking, I said. Jennifer's expression didn't change. We're being more than fair, George. 5 years doesn't entitle you to our mother's life's work. She built that import business from nothing over 20 years. You showed up at the end and now you think you deserve half? I don't think I deserve anything, I said. But Stephanie was my wife. We made decisions together. She wanted me to... To what? Charlene interrupted. Continue living in a penthouse you could never afford on your own. Run a business you know nothing about. Mom may have had feelings for you, but that doesn't change reality. The way she said feelings, like it was something embarrassing, something trivial. Castellano cleared his throat. Mr. Pence, I strongly advise you to review these documents with your own counsel, but I should mention that my clients are prepared to make this process either very simple or very complicated. The choice is yours. Is that a threat? I asked. It's a reality, Jennifer said. We can tie this up in probate court for years, contest every claim, make it expensive and exhausting, or you can sign these papers, take the settlement, and move on with your life. I looked at both of them. These women I'd tried so hard to connect with over 5 years. I'd sent birthday gifts they never acknowledged. Invited them to dinners they were always too busy to attend. Tried to be a stepfather even though they made it clear they wanted nothing from me except distance. Your mother loved you both, I said quietly. Even when you didn't visit. Even when you forgot to call. She kept hoping you'd come around. Charlene's jaw tightened. Don't try to guilt us. We had our reasons for keeping our distance. What reasons? I asked. You, Jennifer said flatly. A 57-year-old man who conveniently appeared right when our mother was vulnerable after the divorce. You think we didn't see what was happening? Nothing was happening. We fell in love. In 5 years, Charlene said. And there it was again. That phrase they kept wielding like a weapon. 5 years doesn't erase 30. Sign the papers, George. Take the money. Find a nice apartment in Queens or wherever. But this penthouse, this business, this life, it was never really yours to begin with. Castellano tapped the folder. We'll need your decision by end of business today. I called my attorney an hour after they left. David Chen had handled the legal paperwork when Stephanie and I got married. He was a good man, thorough, the kind of lawyer who returned calls within an hour. George, I'm so sorry about Stephanie, he said when he picked up. I just heard. How are you holding up? Not well, I admitted. And it's about to get worse. Her daughters just left. They want me to sign away everything. There was a pause. Everything? The penthouse, the business, her investments, all of it. They're offering me $200,000 to disappear quietly. That's insane, David said immediately. You were married 5 years. New York is an equitable distribution state. Even without a will, you'd be entitled to... There is a will, I said. Stephanie had one. I just don't know what's in it. Then we need to see it. Don't sign anything until we review the actual estate documents. George, I'm serious. Do not sign anything. We met that afternoon at his office in Midtown. David had already started making calls, trying to track down Stephanie's estate attorney. He was animated in a way I'd rarely seen, pacing behind his desk. "This is a shakedown," he said. "Classic intimidation tactic. They're hoping you'll be too grief-stricken to think clearly. We can fight this, George. We will fight this." I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, strangely calm. "What if I don't want to fight?" David stopped pacing. "What? What if I just sign the papers? Are you out of your mind?" He leaned forward, hands on the desk. "George, you're talking about walking away from millions of dollars, your home, your wife's business, everything she built." "Maybe they're right," I said. "Maybe 5 years isn't long enough." "That's grief talking," David said gently. "And possibly shock. Listen to me. As your attorney and your friend, I'm telling you that signing those papers would be the biggest mistake of your life. Let me handle this. Let me fight for you." I looked at him, this good man who wanted to help me. "I need to think about it." "Don't think too long," he warned. "They gave you until end of business today. That's not an accident. They want you to make a rash decision." I nodded, but I'd already made my decision. I just couldn't tell him yet. If you've ever been underestimated or pushed aside by people who only love what you can give them instead of who you are, subscribe to this channel today. We tell the stories of those who stay silent because they know that in the end, the truth will always have the final word. The meeting was scheduled for 4 o'clock at Castellano's firm in a glass tower on Park Avenue, the kind of building where even the elevator felt expensive. David insisted on coming with me, though I told him it wasn't necessary. "It's absolutely necessary," he'd said on the phone that morning. "You don't go into a lion's den without backup." We rode the elevator to the 42nd floor in silence. David kept glancing at me like I was a bomb that might detonate. I told him I planned to sign the papers. He'd spent an hour trying to talk me out of it. "This is insanity," he'd said. "George, please, just let me negotiate. We can get you a fair settlement, at least." "I don't want to negotiate," I'd told him. Now we sat in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Midtown. Jennifer and Charlene were already there, flanking Castellano at the head of the table. They looked confident, satisfied, like they'd already won. "Mr. Pence," Castellano said, gesturing to the chairs opposite him. "Thank you for coming. I trust you've had time to review the documents with counsel?" David jumped in before I could respond. "My client hasn't had adequate time to fully—" "I'll sign them," I said. The room went quiet. David turned to me, his voice urgent and low. "George, we talked about this. Don't do this." "I've made my decision." Jennifer and Charlene exchanged a look. Not quite triumphant yet, but getting there. Castellano slid a stack of documents across the polished table, each one flagged with neon tabs marking signature lines. "These are multiple documents," he explained. "Transfer of property title, relinquishment of business ownership, waiver of spousal inheritance rights. Each needs to be signed and initialed." David grabbed my arm. "George, as your attorney, I'm begging you. We can fight this. We can win." I looked at him and tried to convey something with my eyes, something I couldn't say out loud. "I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" His voice cracked slightly. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're about to make yourself homeless." I picked up the pen Castellano offered. It was heavy, expensive, probably cost more than I used to make in a week. The first document was the property transfer for the penthouse. $4.2 million, signed away with a flick of my wrist. Jennifer leaned back in, her chair visibly relaxing. The second document was the business. Stephanie's entire company, everything she'd built. I signed it without reading past the first paragraph. Charlene actually smiled. David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I can't watch this. George, I'm formally advising you one last time. This is a mistake." "Noted," I said, and signed the third page. By the 7th document, Jennifer was practically glowing. Charlene had her phone out, probably texting someone the good news. I signed the last document and set the pen down. The stack of papers sat between us like a finished verdict. Jennifer reached for them immediately, pulling them toward her side of the table as if I might change my mind. "Well," Castellano said, gathering the documents into a neat pile, "that concludes the transfer agreements. Now we just need to cross-reference these with Mrs. Wood's original estate documents to ensure everything is properly—" He stopped mid-sentence. His hand froze over the papers. "Mr. Castellano?" Jennifer prompted. He didn't respond. He was staring at something on his laptop screen, his face going from confident to confused to something close to horror. The color drained from his cheeks. "Richard?" Charlene leaned forward. "What is it?" Castellano's finger traced down his screen, then back up again like he was reading the same passage multiple times trying to make sense of it. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "There's a clause," he said quietly. "A clause?" Jennifer's voice had an edge now. "What kind of clause?" He looked up at the sisters, and I saw something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Fear. Professional fear. The kind that comes when a lawyer realizes they've made a catastrophic mistake. "In your mother's will. A behavioral provision. I don't understand how I missed this during our initial review." "What does it say?" Charlene demanded. Castellano cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "It's quite specific, actually. It states that if either daughter attempts to coerce, pressure, or legally compel George Pence into relinquishing his rightful inheritance through threat of litigation or financial intimidation within 6 months of Mrs. Wood's death, then what?" Jennifer's voice was sharp now. He scrolled down, reading directly from the screen. "Then all trust funds, investment accounts, and designated inheritances for said daughters shall be immediately dissolved and donated in their entirety to the Stephanie Wood Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs, with George Pence named as the sole trustee and executor." The room went absolutely silent. You could hear the hum of the building's ventilation system, the distant sound of traffic 42 floors below. Jennifer's face had gone white. "That's not possible." "I'm looking at it right now," Castellano said, his voice hollow. "Signed, notarized, filed with the county clerk 3 years ago." David, who'd been standing by the window, let out a sound that was half laugh, half disbelief. Charlene stood up so fast her chair rolled backward. "Let me see that." Castellano turned his laptop toward her, his hand shaking slightly. She leaned over the screen, Jennifer crowding in beside her. I watched their faces as they read, watched the exact moment comprehension hit. "This can't be legal," Jennifer said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's completely legal," David said from his position by the window. He was smiling now, a genuine smile. "A testamentary conduct clause. Unusual, but entirely enforceable in New York." Castellano scrolled down further. "There's more. The clause specifically states that the act of presenting coercive documentation demanding voluntary relinquishment constitutes triggering behavior, and that Mr. Pence's signature on such documents, rather than invalidating his rights, serves as legal proof that coercion occurred." "That's insane," Charlene said. "She can't punish us for protecting our inheritance." "She didn't punish you for protecting it," I said quietly. "It was the first time I'd spoken since signing the papers. She punished you for trying to steal mine." Jennifer whirled on me. You knew this whole time." I met her eyes and didn't answer. I didn't need to. "The provision is very clear," Castellano continued, his professional veneer cracking. "By presenting Mr. Pence with relinquishment documents within the 6-month prohibited period, and by securing his signature under duress, you've triggered the dissolution clause. Your trust funds, which total approximately $2.3 million combined, along with your designated inheritance shares, are now forfeit." "Duress?" Jennifer's voice was rising. "We didn't force him to do anything. He signed willingly." "After you threatened years of expensive litigation," David interjected. "After you told him to take the money and find an apartment in Queens. After you showed up with your attorney the day after the funeral. The will specifically defines those actions as coercive behavior." Charlene sank back into her chair. "Mom did this on purpose." "Yes," I said, "she did." "She set a trap," Jennifer said, staring at me with something close to hatred. "And you let us walk right into it." "I didn't let you do anything," I said. "You made your own choices. You could have waited. You could have been kind. You could have mourned your mother before trying to erase me from her life." Castellano closed his laptop. "Ladies, I need to inform you that I can no longer represent you in this matter. There's a clear conflict of interest now." The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Jennifer and Charlene left without another word, Castellano trailing behind them, looking like a man headed to his own funeral. Professional malpractice insurance only covers so much, and he just cost his clients over $2 million. David and I rode the elevator down in silence until we hit the lobby. Then he turned to me, shaking his head with something between admiration and disbelief. You knew the whole time, he said. Stephanie told me about the clause 6 months before she died, I admitted. She said if her daughters ever came after me the way she feared they would, I shouldn't fight them. She said fighting would only drag things out. But if I let them show who they really were, the will would handle the rest. That's one hell of a trust fall, David said. She was one hell of a woman. We stepped out onto Park Avenue. The late afternoon sun was cutting between the buildings, turning the glass towers into mirrors of gold. The city moved around us, indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded 42 floors up. That was 8 months ago. The foundation officially launched last month, the Stephanie Wood Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs. We fund small business loans for women starting import companies, just like Stephanie did 30 years ago. I run it from her old office in the penthouse, surrounded by her books and her plants and her vision. Jennifer and Charlene contested the will, of course. They hired 3 different law firms before finally accepting that their mother's clause was ironclad. Last I heard, Jennifer was still at Goldman but had to downsize her apartment. Charlene closed her consulting firm and took a position at someone else's company. I don't take pleasure in their situation. Stephanie wouldn't have wanted that, but she did want them to understand that love isn't transactional, that 5 years of genuine partnership matters more than 30 years of entitled expectation. I still have coffee every Tuesday morning at that cafe on Hudson Street. I sit at our usual table by the window. Sometimes I bring files from the foundation, applications from women who remind me of Stephanie. Determined, brilliant, underestimated. And sometimes I just sit there with my coffee and the newspaper, talking to her in my head, telling her about the lives we're changing, with the legacy she left behind. The legacy she made sure would survive her daughter's greed. A will is more than just a legal document. It's the final message you leave to the people who actually showed up when it mattered. Stephanie made sure her last words protected the man who held her hand until her very last breath. To hear more heart-wrenching stories about the enduring power of legacy and the quiet victory of a second chance at love, hit subscribe immediately as part of your support to the growth of this community we're building.